Welcome to the Burnout Expert Podcast. Today we have with us Dr. Guyla Greenly, who is an exceptional leader in burnout prevention and leadership enrichment. She was the CEO of a statewide trade organization. She has over 30 years of experience in business and in nonprofit management. She was a single parent with 2 teenagers, and she completed a master's degree while she was also working within this organization. And then when her children moved out of the house, she really just started feeling like she had no reason to go home. And all of this is a part of Guyla's burnout journey. And through that journey, she changed careers, which we'll be diving into that as well. And she now owns her own business. It's Dandelion Leadership Coaching, where she focuses on helping leaders and emerging professionals really make confident decisions, effectively managing their stress and helping them to prevent burnout in the workplace. By doing so, these individuals that she works with can really build impactful teams, and they can really foster thriving work environments. Dr. Greenly has also written a book. It is called Knock It Off: How to Quit Being a Jerk at Work, which I love this title because that dives into when we start getting into the moods and anger, and then we get to the workplace and all those things. It's like, why are you being a jerk? Like, which piece of that puzzle is that? So I'm so excited to dive into this. The book really helps those transform workplace dynamics and nurture positive relationships. And additionally, Guyla is certified facilitator of appreciation at work and toxic workplace prevention and repair, which is providing valuable insight and strategies for cultivating a culture of appreciation and addressing toxic dynamics, which we know from a lot of the other episodes we've gone into, that toxic dynamics at work, toxic dynamics at home, different relationships can really, really lead to burnout. So I'm excited to dive into this. So if you have ever desired change, whether it's resolving conflicts, achieving work-life balances, motivating your team, overcoming obstacles, improving organization, and combating burnout, then Dr. Greenly is definitely here to guide you on your journey. So with that, I am so excited to have you. Welcome to the Burnout Expert Podcast, Guyla.
Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Absolutely. So let's start first with your burnout journey, because that's how all the So what we also find with burnout and from past interviews that we've done is there's the point that you have your crash, but there's also all of the stuff leading up to that.
Right.
So where would you like to begin in telling us your story?
I think that for me, the burnout began when it was going to happen once I took that CEO position. I mean, there's stresses all the time, and I had stress when I was the executive assistant at the organization. But ultimately, I could say, I'm not the boss. That was my boss's decision. I did what I was told to do, and I could leave that at the door. Now, I did have some major stressors in that role because we had a toxic CEO for a while. And I even ended up in the emergency room seeing double, and went into, they did a CT scan and MRI and everything and found lesions on my brain. They thought that I had MS, and they told me that I was going to need to take some time off. And I had a panic attack when they told me that. And they said they thought that they were helping me by telling me that. And I was like, I may lose my job. And, I'm that single parent, with the 2 kids, and the only one responsible for the finances. And I'm like, I can't lose my job. And so they had me looking at what medications I was going to start taking for MS, and that just convinced that was the issue. And then a spinal tap came clear. I had no other symptoms, nothing else that can confirm it. and they decided that it was just stress.
Mm.
And it has been 12 years, I think, since that time, with not any other symptoms related to MS. It's been completely ruled out.
This then when you were in the executive position before the CEO?
When I was the assistant, because yes.
You were already crashing then.
I was crashing then, yes, because of the toxicity of my boss.
Mm-hmm.
And it even came to a point where I was still having headaches, but I was coming to work. The nurse said, you should not be working full days after the spinal tap and everything you've been through. You need to be working part days and you need to go home. So I told my boss that, and she's like, well, you need to make a decision. Are you going to do what the medical professionals are telling you, or are you going to keep your job?
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And I went home, and I ended up coming in and quitting later. And I was doing some freelance work. And without me there, the board started realizing her toxicity without me there to be that buffer between her and the members. And they fired her and asked me to come back as a consultant and do their convention. Because they're like, we don't even know what to do and how to do everything. And if you don't come back and help us, we won't have a convention. So I went back on a contract labor status, and everybody kept kind of twisting my arm to take that CEO position. And I was afraid to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was in that time that you stepped away. So as soon as I mean, that's a huge decision. As you said, you're a single parent. And moving to work. Once you stepped away, I will have a couple of questions. First off, how long did it take you to find contract work, and how did you feel?
I actually was finding things pretty quickly. Not all of them were high paying, but I was managing to make enough to maintain my executive assistant salary.
So you knew that you were going to be okay.
Right.
And when we look at your symptoms, then we look at all of those stressors that you had from the moment you stepped away and then you found out you're going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Where were your symptoms then?
I didn't have any physical symptoms then.
Like no gut, no sleep struggles, like your sleep. How was your sleep before?
Terrible. And I'd look back at what I put on social media, and I'm embarrassed, to look back at those days and see that I was that person, that every Friday I was posting, thank God it's Friday. And every Sunday I was posting, oh no, I have to go back to work. And I really don't like that kind of posting. And that's why it's embarrassing to me to look back and see that I was that Eeyore type of person at that time, and didn't even realize how bad I had gotten. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that led me to realize that I needed to leave while that person was still in leadership was I realized that I was as upset in my dealings with her as I had been in my dealings with my ex-husband as I was going through divorce.
Wow.
And I was like, this is not right. It's not fair to me. It's not fair to my kids. And why am I allowing someone that I don't have a personal relationship with to control this much of my emotion?
Wow. May I ask as well about your moods? So you have these kids at home. It's hard, and it's already hard as a single parent. That part of burnout as well is moods. How were your moods when you were in the executive assistant? How were your moods then when you quit and walked away? Did you notice a difference in your moods and your ability to handle stressors at home?
Definitely. Yeah, I didn't get as stressed out by the constant chatter and bickering of the of the kids and it was all, there was so much that was built into it, because I had the boss that had hired me, and then she left, and then I had this toxic boss come in, and I was still dealing with residual fallout from a divorce, and then the trying to figure out what it looks like to be this parent, and And so there were a lot of stressors that were adding to it. And I probably could have handled things better had the boss not been so toxic. And then, and I'll save it right here for down the road, all the things that I learned after leaving the CEO position that had I had those tools earlier would have helped.
Yes.
But we can come back to those as we
will, for sure. No, that's
closer to that. Yeah.
Dive into. No, for sure. Okay, so now you actually were in burnout in that executive assistance position. Now that we're diving into
that. And I had completely forgot about that when we first started talking.
Me too. And this is what I want people to acknowledge too, is when you're going through the muck, when you're going through all of this and these stresses are happening, and like divorce itself is not easy. Usually with a divorce comes a move, which we often say as well, that a new job position, moving, or becoming a parent, divorce, moving, change of jobs are like some of your top 3 stressors that you come into play. And you had a bunch of those hitting you.
I did.
So this burnout was happening before that. I'm making an assumption, but if you were going through a divorce as well, there's been years of stress at home as well, which meant that when you left work, you were not coming home to a place that felt safe for you either.
Right.
So there were most likely like other symptoms. So how long had your sleep been off track?
I don't even remember anymore because it had been so long.
Yeah. Like, did it get to the point where you just thought your sleep was almost normal because it was just what your everyday was?
Yeah. Trouble getting to sleep. And then once I got to sleep, I had trouble getting up, waking up, getting around. But, I had those kids. I had to.
Right.
And I had started a really good exercise routine, and that was helping me a lot. But then I was still married at the time, and my husband at that time was not stepping up to, he said he was going to watch the kids while I went to the gym, but then he didn't. And so then I ended up having to drop out of that kickboxing program that I was in. And then, it was shortly after that he ended up moving out, and we ended up dealing with all of the other stuff. And so then, I started gaining weight and not sleeping, not eating properly, doing a lot of comfort eating. But then when after he was gone and when things had kind of gotten settled down, I had started working at a church as a publications editor. And I had a really good team of people that I worked with there. And a couple of us started a diet and exercise program, and we'd challenge each other with our drinking water, and whoever got there first filled the other one's jug. And, and we'd be like, oh, I'm halfway down. And, we just really encouraged and helped each other. So there was a lot of healing from the divorce at the time, plus getting into good physical shape.
Yeah.
So I had that benefit going into the executive assistant position, and I really did enjoy it until we had that toxic leader come in.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you were eating healthier, you were exercising, you had a group of peers that were motivating you, and you were doing other habits with the water and all that stuff, all the things they say we should be doing to get out of burnout. And once this extra stress of this toxic environment came into place, so that actually was helping you get out of the burnout and the stress from the divorce.
Exactly.
Other big stress hit, those tools were not helping you anymore.
Right. Well, it was easy to let them go.
That too.
So then I wasn't eating as well. I wasn't exercising as much. And I started isolating a little bit more because I was focused on getting work done and getting school done and taking care of my kids. So I wasn't interacting with those friends as much as I had been.
So you just said isolating as well. And we've done a whole bunch of interviews so far, and that is one that we actually haven't talked about. And now that I'm thinking about it, I totally isolated in my burnout too, because you're feeling crap and you have no energy, and you're tapped out that you just can't even deal with I remember the brain fog that when somebody would speak to me, it would take so much energy to process what they just said and then
Yeah.
reply, that sometimes before I'd even reply, I'd forget what they'd even said to me, that
Mhm.
I struggled to have simple conversations.
Mm.
Yeah, I isolated for that. Plus my moods, I was
Yeah.
by
Yeah.
everything, all the small
Mhm.
things got to me, and that
Mhm.
isolate, that's one that we have not mentioned recently. So I'm glad you brought that one up. Yeah.
Yeah, and it'll come up more as we get into the CEO part of
Yeah. So
things.
let's dive into the CEO part.
So yeah, so after leaving that executive assistant position, having a couple of months where I was doing my own thing and relaxing and stuff, then coming back to the association and being asked to apply for that role was, I really struggled on whether I should do that or not. And I had a lot of good counsel from previous bosses that knew my abilities, from friends, and I was encouraged to go for it. And I was told, you'll set the organizational tone, you'll set your boundaries, and you'll be as stressed as you choose to allow yourself to be. And so for a while, everything went really well, and I loved it. And I just dove right into that job, and I really did well with it, and I made a lot of new friends, and I grew and really enjoyed it a lot. But things from my childhood and that past of being a people pleaser, oldest child of an alcoholic, and that always wanting to keep the peace and stuff, started to weigh on me because I did not set the boundaries that I should have set. So I was allowing myself to be available to my leadership at times when I really should have had some boundaries. And the way I looked at it was, they're all volunteers. I'm the paid employee. They're volunteers. They have their jobs to do. So if they need to do board work at 6 a.m., then I need to respond to them. Or if they need to do board work at 9 p.m., I need to respond to them. And that was on me. No one asked me to do that. That was me forgetting to put my own boundaries in place.
And not necessarily forgetting, just not ever being taught.
Right. Yeah.
If we are going back to, as you said, like a child's childhood trauma with an alcoholic as well, depending on what does happen. I know from like my own experience, it was where anger came out a lot, that I lost my voice. I learned that if I was quieter, I got yelled at. And also not wanting to do anything to rock the boat.
Yes, definitely.
Can cause you to lose your voice. It can to be just, you're actually protecting yourself by not setting boundaries.
Right. Yeah.
Because you're protecting what you learned as a childhood. But as you're an adult now, see now that, oh, I'm not in that situation anymore.
Right.
Boundaries. So we didn't know, and we also use them as a protective mechanism.
Yeah, that's very valid. And my dad did end up getting help, and he has been sober for over 40 years.
Amazing.
But I did definitely, as the oldest child, I felt it was my responsibility to help my mom, help my little sisters, keep the house clean, do my chores, make sure my homework was done. If I was the good girl, then nobody could be upset about anything and everything would be good. And then I carried that into my marriage, well, if I'm just thin enough, keep my hair long enough, keep the house clean enough, do all these things, then he'll love me. And, and unhealthy coping mechanisms.
Yeah. I do want to switch the wording though on it being a coping mechanism and more of a protection.
Good point. Very good point.
That's the thing, like as well, this week, I know I was speaking with a friend as well. We were doing something and she was saying self-sabotage, and the coaches were like, it's not self-sabotage, it's protecting yourself. And we can even go into alcoholism and even look at it in a sense of their or somebody like smoking pot or doing drugs, they're doing it to numb themselves, which is
very true.
It's protecting themselves from
That's true.
something that's happened in their life. Now that does affect the other people around them, and it doesn't mean that the drinking or the drugs or anything is great. But when we start to look at it as to what are you protecting yourself from, it starts to change that narrative and allow us to look at that thing not as like a bad habit, even anorexia, bulimia. I'm reading a book right now that's totally talking about all of this. And it is saying all of these things. Anorexia and bulimia is usually protecting a part of you was in a trauma at one point in time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once we start going, okay, what is this protecting you from?
Mm-hmm.
It changes how we look at it and how we work with it. Instead of trying to get rid of it, we start working on what it is it protecting and how do we it's protecting. So yeah, sorry, that went off a little.
No, that's great. No, it's really good information. And
yeah.
But so I loved the job. I thrived in it. While my kids were at home, I loved my life at home. My kids had friends over all the time. We were always doing something. We also would travel and go out to the country for other events and things. So I kept a fairly good balance for quite a while. But then it was getting to the point where I was allowing myself to be available to everyone at all times. So then everybody needed a piece of me. And I felt like, I had my staff, I had local board association executives across the state. I had my executive team, and so I felt like I was facilitating everyone else and doing their job during the day. And then I would finally do my stuff after 5. And once my kids were out of the house and the last pet had passed away, then it became that, I might as well stay till 9 o'clock at night and get this work done. I might as well get ahead of the game. I might as well load my staff's desks up, so that when they come in the morning, they know what they're doing and they're all prepared. I've signed everything, done everything I needed to do. And then go home and take a little more work home with me and sit in front of the TV and continue to work. And that was not sustainable.
Not sustainable, or even it's not fulfilling all of your buckets. It's filling one bucket.
Right, exactly.
This job that you do love to do, and you love to serve people, and you love to help your staff and be organized, and but it's not filling those other buckets.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. Yeah. And I used to love to do yoga, and I was doing that some, but I had pulled away from doing that. I don't even remember now why, but yoga was something that is still something that, when you're focused on holding a pose and you're focused on that one spot in front of you to keep in tree pose or something, you cannot be thinking about that email you need to respond to, or the phone calls that you need to make, or anything like that. You have to be in the moment. And so I have found that to be a very helpful and healing practice for me.
Amazing. Yeah. And that's the thing when we do look at leadership as well, every promotion that you have, every promotion comes with more responsibility for those that are under you. And then have to answer to whoever's above you. And when you're at the top, you're still, as you said, answering to a board.
Exactly.
Right? So it's not like, even at the top with many, if it's a government position, you're still answering to like the political side and to whoever is like giving the money to the government organization. If you're like, it is, there still is some sort of a pull, even from the person at the top, as to what they have to do, how they have to operate.
Right.
And every time you go up, you're just in charge of more and more things under you.
Right.
There's more and more placed on your shoulders.
And that was something that was happening with the organization as well, as that the organization was expanding.
Oh man.
But my staff wasn't expanding.
Yes.
So we purchased a building that we were major owners in, which put me on the building board, and it put me on as the treasurer with them. And, and then we were trying to lease out some of the offices that we had. So then I'm being a property manager, and, it was just a lot of things getting added. And then, like I said, with not having the proper boundaries, and it's just being available to people all the time, I started being sick every New Year's Eve.
Mm.
And my doctor explained it as that I was literally running on adrenaline.
Yes.
And that once I took a couple of days off, my body would catch up and I would crash and I would get sick.
Yeah.
And then I also had pneumonia over one of those holiday breaks. And then in near the end of my time as the CEO, I got pneumonia, a walking pneumonia. It was atypical pneumonia. I was trying to get to working out again, trying to take control of my health. And I was meeting with a personal trainer early in the morning before work, and I just couldn't even get through the warm up. And she's like, "This is not normal. I think you need to see your doctor." And as I was driving home, I fell asleep at a stop sign. Fortunately, I lived out in the country. There wasn't a lot of traffic, but that scared me, and then I drove into my garage, shut the car off, and fell back to sleep in the car. And so I did make an appointment with my doctor, and they were looking at things like heart stresses. They did a stress test, did an EKG. They're looking at all of these things. And finally, it was through an X-ray that they found that I had atypical pneumonia. I wasn't running a fever. I wasn't coughing. I didn't have any of those symptoms, but I did have atypical pneumonia. And and this, again, it was on me. I did not take any time off, and I continued to travel with my job and continued to work. I just, take a little nap on the couch in my office and then get back to it. And one of my board members and I attended some meetings in Arizona, and the past president of our national organization was one of the speakers. And when I had first met him, he was tall and strong and healthy. And after his time as the president of this national organization, he had a heart attack. He started having health issues. So he was at this meeting, literally sitting to speak and having an oxygen mask and taking it off to speak and then putting it back on. And his speech was on how we need to put on our own oxygen mask before we can help others, and that we need to take care of our own health or we can't take care of anybody else. And that just really started speaking to me. And then I started seeing a counselor again, someone I had seen through my divorce, and I was talking to my family. And I created this plan that I was going to work for 2 more years. That would put me at an even number in my age. It would put me at 12 years at the organization, and my life can kind of be divided up in 12s when you look back through patterns. And so I thought, well, I'll just live on one paycheck and put the other one in the bank. And by the end of that 2 years, I would have, a full year of income stored up. I'd have no debt, and then I could leave the position. But I just kept not feeling well, getting more. I was not handling the stresses as well, obviously. So then you say the moods, the personality. I am more of a feeler, make decisions based on the best for all people. And I was moving into that thinker mode, which I learned about afterwards. I didn't recognize it at the time, but I became more callous. I didn't respond in the ways that were normal for me, and didn't handle little things as well as I would have in the past. And just was like, I can't keep doing this. And the counselor said to me, well, my dad, first back up a minute, my dad had said, why 2017? Why not 2016? And I said, well, because this will give me time to save up money. And he says, I'm not sure that's the best thing for you. So then I was talking to my counselor, and she said, I would have to agree with your dad. She said, I really think that if you don't leave this level of stress that you're under, you're going to need someone else to take care of you instead of you taking care of everyone else. And so with a lot of fear, but so tired, I almost didn't care anymore. I went ahead and put in my resignation, sent it in October to do a December 31st end date. And so from being diagnosed with atypical pneumonia the end of July to the end of December, when I finally left, I did not miss a single day of work and went on 7 trips and trained my replacement.
And what was in my mind when you were saying that, like, New Year's Eve holidays is when you got sick, I'm like, you didn't mention any vacations. I'm like, and I know your physician had vacation days.
Yes. And there were times that I lost vacation because I didn't use it.
Yep.
And the boss before me, not the toxic boss, but the one before who had hired me, she never took more than a couple of days at a time away. And because so it's something that she taught me was that the organization couldn't survive 2 weeks without the CEO, is basically the message that was given. So I wouldn't take extended vacations. I would take a day or two here or a 3-day weekend. I'd take a day off to make a 3-day weekend. I'd take little bits and pieces here and there. But the final year that I was there, I had an opportunity come up. I'd done my master's degree in journalism, and I was at meetings in DC, and I was sitting, I had a little break and was sitting with a friend who was also on my board and looking at my emails. And I said, oh, one of my professors is doing a writers conference. That'd be really fun to get to go meet him, because I did my whole master's online. And then I looked a little further, and he was doing it in Ireland. And I was like, oh, well, I can't go. And she's like, why not? And I'm like, because it's in Ireland. I can't just drop everything and in 2 months go to Ireland. And she's like, why not? I know you have vacation you haven't used. She's like, do you have money and savings, right? And I was like, well, yeah. So she's like, apply, do it, because they only took 10 people. So I did. And within the hour, I was accepted in, and I was still only going to take that week. And then my brother-in-law was like, why are you only going to take a week? You're going to Ireland for the first time. Take 2 weeks. You've got the vacation time. And so I did. And it was the most wonderful experience, and so peaceful and calming. I'd always thought I didn't want to travel internationally by myself, but I did. And it was fabulous. It was like one of the best things I've ever done in my life.
Amazing. Yeah, I've done some traveling by myself. It's so fascinating. It's so much fun. It's fascinating when you say this about the vacation and that, because as my business has grown and I'm bringing on team members, I make sure that we have operating procedures in place that if any of them are sick or any of them, and I'm like, guys, this isn't so that people will replace you. I'm like, you're not, like, they're specialized in what they do. Like somebody who's just say editing my podcast, I have my VA, all of that stuff. But I'm like, if you have everything written down step by step and the links that they use, that way you can go away. That way you go on a vacation, and hopefully we can have stuff done ahead of time and be planned, that none of us have to step in. But what if, and it happened to one of my employees as well, that one point where there was an illness with one of their family members. And I'm like, go, we have your operating procedures. We will all, as a team, step in and take this for you while you're gone. But it's fascinating because I have to encourage them to take vacation. I have to talk to like, this is why we have these operating procedures. This is why they're here, is so that you can. But the mentality nowadays, it's the mentality. It's all over. And it's just that we have to, that, as I believe we're going to be getting into, is creating better work environments, less toxic environments. One of those is starting to change some of these mindsets. Of like, when you have vacation, take it. And that doesn't mean, for some, it may be helpful to do a lot of your to-do list and your jobs around the house, but give yourself also time in there to actually do something or go away, do a staycation. But a staycation doesn't mean you're still helping everybody else and doing it, checking your emails and all of that stuff.
Exactly. And that was one of the things that I had to learn. And I did learn it through the burnout. And so it was that you need to truly regroup. You need to, and that means turning off the emails, turning off the text messages, or whatever, because that would happen. I'd take a week off and I'd get a text message about something going on and I'd instantly be back in and I'd be mad and stuff. And then one of the people that had sent a text one time, I was like, seriously, this was really at the end of the burnout, and I was not responding how I normally would have, but I was like, seriously, I can't even take a week off without you guys dragging me into your bickering. So I just wanted to make sure that you knew what was going on. I didn't expect you to answer. I just the loop. And I was like, an email would have been better because I turned my email off. And then I regretted that I had been so sharp with her. And that was so out of character for me. But that's where I was at that point, where the least little thing.
Yeah. And at the time, though, I mean, you did say that you felt bad after. But are there times that you now look back at yourself in leadership where you would have sworn up and down that it was the other person's fault, that it was the other person doing something, but as you got out of burnout, you started realizing, oh, maybe that was me.
Yeah, there was that too. How I responded to things, how I got upset about something that perhaps they didn't even intend it to be something to be upset.
So for those that are listening right now, I do want you to start thinking about that. If somebody is bringing to your attention, somebody that maybe you're being a little more upset about things or more frustrated, and you're looking at them going, what, are you crazy? Like, this person did do this, or this did happen, and you're getting really riled up about that situation, to maybe it is so hard in the moment. And it is something that until you're out of burnout to really sit and look back, but take that right now, maybe from a different view, and go and ask somebody else that you truly trust their opinion, and just say, hey, this just happened. Somebody on this podcast about burnout said that this is a burnout sign. I have other symptoms. I'm swear up and down that it is this other person that is totally at fault, and I should be angry at this, but I trust you. What do you think? Like, ask them in that moment right now. I mean, that is one of the best things. And if that person you trust is saying, maybe you are burnt out, then maybe it is time to start implementing the steps.
There would be times that I would have someone else read a text or read an email and say, am I taking this completely wrong?
Good for you.
And there were times that they'd say, yeah, I wouldn't put so much emphasis on that. I don't think it really means anything.
Yeah.
I'd still stew on it. I'd still have it going in the back of my mind, and I'd still be like, well, was that person right? Or am I right? Or, and it was harder for me to let things go.
Yes.
When I was in the depth of the burnout. I took things more personally. And then I ran it over and over in my head. And how should I have responded? How could I have responded better? Or, things like that. And I couldn't just let it roll off and move on to the next thing.
Yes. And so for two things for that, one is social media. We find that, myself included, when I was in burnout, I needed to comment on people's posts. I needed to have my voice heard by these people, even though in other aspects I didn't feel like I have a voice, but on social media, I sure did. I was sucked and pulled in, and there'd be these long comments, and it was this whole thing. And the other part too is I also felt like I needed to control my environment more, the way people did things. So the way my husband loaded the dishwasher, the way because when the rest of your life is out of control, you control what you can control. Right. No, that bowl should not be placed this way in the dishwasher. You can't organize a dishwasher. Like, it's just the silliest things. My gosh, he's doing the dishwasher. He's probably going to start it, and once it's done, he empties it more than I do. So why does it matter?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's burnout is amazing. Okay, so we have you now. You have gotten to the point in December where you have decided to step away.
So I did step away with the intent of starting this business that I have now, but with a different name. And that was my intent. And I started getting business cards and I started getting things, but then I just found that I didn't have the physical energy to be doing anything. And I was sleeping a lot. And I was still overly sensitive to people's comments. And then I was thinking, well, I haven't accomplished enough. It's been 3 months since I left, or it's been 6 months since I left, or however many months. And I'm like, I need to make people proud of me. I need to prove that I had a good reason to leave and that I'm doing better things and stuff. And I mentioned it to one of my past board members when I saw him a year later. I said something about, well, I haven't done enough yet to be proud of me. And he said, what are you talking about? He's like, I have always been proud of you. For you were always an excellent person and an achiever, and you're the one that's putting this on you. None of the rest of us are thinking anything about what you're doing out there since you left. Mm-hmm. And I had to, and then I started learning more about burnout. I started realizing, this is really what I had. And learned that it can take a year or more to heal from burnout.
They say a month for every year you were in burnout.
Okay, well, yeah. So for me, it was a minimum of a year before I really started feeling like I could make good, solid decisions again. Yeah. That I could get out and create new things. And where that led to was me going back to school to get my doctorate. It was something I had always wanted to do, but I'd always told myself that I didn't need to, or I was too old, or I wouldn't get my return on investment if I went and did it. And I had a lot of people that would say, if it's something you want to do it. What difference does it make if you go and make a lot of money afterwards? It's an accomplishment for you. And I had a friend that's about 10 years older than me, because I kept saying, well, I'll be 53 by the time I graduate. I'll be, that's too old. And she's 10 years older than me. And she said, you're going to be 53 no matter what. Do you want to be 53 wishing you'd gotten a doctorate? Yes. Or 53 with a doctorate?
I love that.
And so I ended up going ahead and doing it. And I put working on hold for the most, and I lived off of savings and some investments that I had, and I did work part-time for a friend at a clothing store, something that I didn't have to put a lot of mental and emotional energy into. I could do a good job there and walk away and go home. Mm-hmm. And so I did that. I'd call it my pay the electric bill job, and that just helped me to be able to do that degree and write the book and things, and then be able to start laying the groundwork for the business I have now. But through that, I learned so much about myself, mm-hmm. and how I'm wired, what are my stressors, why they're my stressors, how I can counteract that or adjust my thinking or adjust my behaviors to not get to that in the red zone burnout or stress level, that I started realizing. And as I was going through my doctorate and specializing in leadership coaching, I started realizing, had I had a coach and had I had someone to listen to, because, when you're in a role like that, you can't talk to your staff. I didn't feel like I could talk to my peers. Too many people talk about it with other people, and the organization I was in, even though it was large, it was small, if that makes any sense. And then I really couldn't talk to my executive committee or my board members, because it would end up in my evaluation at the end of the year.
Yes.
And then I didn't have a spouse at home. And so I didn't have anybody that I could really talk some of these things out with. And I learned, as an extrovert, talking things out is part of what I do. And I learned that, and I beat myself up a lot for, well, I wasn't strong enough. I didn't, if I had been stronger, if I had better boundaries, if I had been smarter, better, whatever, I would have handled that job better and I wouldn't have burned out.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I learned is that extroverts' brains, they've done brain scans, and they've shown that extroverts' brains are connected to the talking process. So,
because I myself though as an extrovert, I'm way more introverted. I like
mm-hmm.
only but my love language is that conversation, is that deep.
Yeah. that quality time with people. Right. But so what when I learned that I'm physically made this way, that I need to talk things out,
yes,
that gave me some permission, to, and you still have to be careful with confidentiality and, just going on and on and on with never changing anything can be unhealthy, so you have to learn those boundaries and those balances. But when I learned that it was okay that I had needed someone to talk things out with because I was physically made that way, then I started to realize all of these things, that if I believe that if I had had a coach, if I had had that safe space to talk things through, I may not have reached that level of burnout.
right. And I do want to say as well that you mentioned that you didn't have a spouse. The thing though is that our spouse, even if we do have one at home,
that's what,
yeah, they may not understand. Like, so you're in a CEO position, same thing. Like, so I'm an entrepreneur, my husband's a police officer,
right?
Very different roles at work, how things happen, how they are. That when I'm talking like lead magnets and funnels and
right,
about all of the things like managing and hiring and firing and just all of that is encompassed, like all my payroll and all of these things. Sometimes his head just spins. And as much as I'm trying, that I do find that having that coach that understands my entrepreneurial side and all of the struggles that an entrepreneur can have is very important. I also have somebody, because I homeschool a 2E child. So I also have somebody, I have a network and a group that helps support for that, because unless you have a 2E child, you don't know what it's like. Like I thought it's like, I had neighbors with an autistic child or an ADHD or like different things. I'm like, I get this, but now we're getting to like ODD and PDA and all these different things that go along with this 2E giftedness, where like my son's brain goes so friggin' fast that I have to put instructions for homeschooling on video so he can 2x the speed so his brain can do it, because if I go too slow, he can't manage it. So I have like, and that's stuff that not everybody's going to get. So that coach that has that expertise like you have in that space of a CEO, of being an executive assistant, of being as well like a parent to kids while being in this corporate environment, of working as well. It's different in nonprofits as well as corporate side, and having that knowledge to bring to the table, that when somebody's saying something, you understand the language they're speaking as
exactly. Yes.
My husband is like, what does that mean? Or okay.
And that's an excellent caveat. And that yes, it's nice to have the spouse that you can kind of unwind and talk with, but you also want to have that boundary and that balance, that you're not exhausting your spouse.
Yes.
Everything. And they're like, can we talk about something besides your job?
Right. And so we all have different things. We have different like parts to ourselves, different pieces. You have spouse in you, you have the parent in you,
right?
You have the career person in you.
Yes.
All different people, and getting a coach to understand those different types of people. So as with what you do, we have, so my background with first responders as well, that's such a different world.
Absolutely.
There's this one gentleman that I always refer to when somebody would like to retire out, or ready to, or needs to be medicaled out, or burnt out, or wants to leave the job for other reasons. He was 30 years in policing and now works in like the corporate world and private, that he is able to help them transition from the one into the other. Resumes are different. The way you speak in interviews is different. Manage yourself. The way your life looks is so different. He transitions with that. And what you do is transitioning with your coaching with people that speak your language, your such a vast knowledge in, and knowledge of the burnout piece as well.
Yeah. And I did have one client say to me one time, she said, you're the perfect coach for me because you're about 5 years ahead of me in everything I'm going through.
Right? Yes.
And so she felt heard and understood.
Yeah.
And that's an important part of coaching, I think, to be able to make that personal connection with someone.
Absolutely. And that's it. When we're looking at a coach, it really does have to be that right fit for us.
Right, right,
Just because it's a great fit for somebody else doesn't mean that's the
right.
right fit for us.
Exactly.
That
Yeah,
way.
right.
Yeah. So, man, okay. I we've been talking for quite a while. I
Yes,
did want to touch on some of the toxic workplace. So
yes.
if we have, let's say we have, are you good for time? Because I know we have gone
Yeah,
for, okay.
I'm fine. It's, this is your show. So
I know, but I just want to make sure we've got your
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Well, but this is so good. So this toxic workplace is a huge thing.
Mhm,
If we were to go back, and you said earlier that if you were to go back with tools you know now,
mhm.
you would have first off been able to recognize things. This is going to be a two-part question.
Okay.
First off, recognize things that were occurring in you. We may have already covered a lot of that. And tools that you had.
Mhm.
What tools would have been maybe your top? Well, I guess it depends on what's going on, but with you working with clients, are there certain tools that come up frequently
Mhm.
that really help your clients? So two-part, what would you have seen differently
Mhm. Mhm.
that you now know with what you do? And what tools are really helpful in a toxic workplace or a leadership workplace?
Okay. So one thing towards the end of the time that I was at the association, we were doing some leadership training, and I had always found that love languages really helped me in my personal lives. And I was wanting to know, how can I incorporate this in the workplace?
Do this.
And I didn't have anything at that time, but as right at the time that I left, I found the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace.
Mhm.
And it came from Dr. Gary Chapman wrote the 5 love languages, and then he started having so many people asking him, how can I apply this at work, that he then partnered with Dr. Paul White, whose experience is in organizational culture and workplace management and that sort of thing. So they wrote the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace.
Mhm.
As I went through that to get certified, I learned that 79% of people who quit their jobs quit because they do not feel appreciated.
Wow.
And I had even, I have to admit, gotten to some of that of, why am I working so hard? Why am I missing school dances and granddaughter's second birthday? And, why am I missing these things for work? Why am I putting so much of my personal life on hold to be able to do this job really well? So then I started getting a little bit of resentment.
Mhm.
And I know that people did appreciate me, but when you're in that burnout phase of things and you're tired already, and then you start looking for the slights. I mean, you don't maybe consciously look for them, but you become more sensitive and you start thinking, oh, well, they don't really appreciate me. If they only knew how much I'm doing, if they only knew how much I'm sacrificing, And so by learning those appreciation languages, and that it's everybody feels appreciation in different ways. Like I may be speaking words of affirmation to you all day long, and maybe that's not what fills you up.
Yes.
Maybe it's acts of service or something, and so it's that giving authentic appreciation in a way that the other person best receives it,
Mhm.
that can fill that emotional tank,
Yes.
and keep them moving forward, going, okay, when we know we're appreciated, it's easier to kind of release some of the stress, because we know that we have a common goal, and we know that we're working together, and we're all appreciating each other.
Amazing.
So that's one phase. The other is that once I knew that and started meeting those people, then I started getting into a group of people that someone said, hey, have you ever heard of Type Coach? I think you'd really be interested in that. So I started looking into it, and it's based on, it's a personality type based on the Jungian personality types, which Myers-Briggs does. But it takes it to a different level of doing more of an adaptive communication. And so by learning about our own personality and learning about the other personality traits, we can start to adapt our communication to be most effective with other people. And by learning that and becoming certified in that, then I took the opportunity to become master certified, where I started learning about personality type and stress, personality type and conflict, personality type and change. And there are all these ways that the way we're wired, we have different things that will cause us stress than maybe our neighbor does. Or different ways that we respond to things, different ways that we're challenged. And when we understand those things, we can give ourselves more grace.
Yes.
And we can give others more grace, and we can learn to work better together.
Absolutely. And that's so fascinating that you say that too, about all the reactions to things as well, because so my son's nervous system is stressed. That's of part of the issues that we have, which is fascinating because I work on nervous systems. So he's not as heightened in states as many of these other kids that we deal with. But the other night, and he's been doing so well at just instantly going from 0 to 100 with like mad. And but something happened the other night, and my husband just went into his room to say goodnight, and he yelled at him. And so we know that's his nervous system kicking in that put him from 0 to 100. Mean to at all. He's not mean.
Right.
We're working on it. But my husband, because of certain, well, this is a like, I guess a trauma thing, like growing up, he fight or freeze. He freezes. So that would be part of too, how people are under stress and people are under
right.
So he shuts down, but upstairs muttering, and then came into the room and kind of closed the bedside table a little bit loudly, which is something he never does. Like my husband is the most gentle, calmest man, but that was his like freeze. And then he's like, oh, like kids yelling at me too. And that was getting him riled up. And then I got upset at him because I realized I was protecting my kids because of being yelled at from my childhood. Right. And so 3 different reactions.
Right.
And I realized it. And the next day I spoke with my kids about it and explained to them. I was upset because our bedroom is right beside my one son. He heard me yell at my husband. This is why I yelled. This is why I yelled. This is what happened. This is where we're doing. And explain it to my husband the next day. And that's something too. He's working on dealing with the freeze part. And my other son, we're also acknowledging The Gap in the Game, being one of my favorite books, where we often, as goal-oriented people, are only focusing on the end goal and missing all of these gaps, like all of the steps getting there, and how much progress my son has made. We need to acknowledge how much progress he's made with the system. And I've also been working on that protective part in me with that community. So, and all of that would show up in that stress result that you're saying too, so that we know how to be working with each other instead of me getting mad at him when he
exactly
stuff. So it's so fascinating in really understanding all of that. And I do that when I hire people too, is I get them to do one of those tests to see what's their personality like, how will I need to be communicating with them, working with them, work, which makes for such a better business environment.
It really does. And I did use some of that with my staff, and I found that I was the only SJ. So when you get into the temperaments, the SJ temperament is responsible. That's their number one driver. That's what makes an SJ keep getting up in the morning, is that need to be responsible and be seen as responsible. Well, then all of my staff were SPs. So we all have that sensor where we're detail oriented, we take in from our senses and we take in all that raw data, but the perceiver has a totally different relationship to time than the judger. And so then when you put it together as the temperament, the SP temperament are the experiencers.
Yes.
So they want to have experiences along the journey. They want to have some fun while they're getting things done. They're more laid back. They're like, yeah, we know the deadline's coming. We'll get it done. And the SJ's over here, no play till the work is done. And, and we got a checklist. Let's get this done. And
in workplaces as well, what I do find is that when you don't know all of these different types and the different roles and positions, then tend to hire the one type that we
most relate to.
We do. And then we end up getting all of these people in our environment. They're all the same type, which different types do different jobs in a different way and a different personality.
Right.
So we end up getting these people with a certain type in the wrong position as for their personality type, or we're dealing with them wrong. Or like, if you have everybody of one type, then you're missing out on different views and ways and doing that can really excel a business as well.
Exactly. And that's it. We talk about a couple of things when I do the type coach trainings, is that one, all types can do all jobs.
Yeah.
It's just, it's like we all have a right hand and a left hand. One we prefer and we're better at. But if we practice, we can use that other hand a lot better. So in a role that maybe we might not think somebody would be suited for, if that's an interest to them and they want to put the effort into stretching and getting better at it, they can do the job. The other thing is that we make assumptions about other people based on our type. So then we can get angry with people, we can get frustrated. And the majority of conflict that happens in a workplace is because of a difference in type.
Yeah.
And that we're just approaching things differently. We're seeing it differently. We're reacting differently. And then to what you said about the hiring the same types of people, we're so focused on having diversity in our workplaces, and that's important and to be celebrated. But we also need to look at that neural diversity.
Yes.
And make sure that we're getting that kind of diversity in our work teams as well.
Because when you get different types looking at one project from a viewpoint, the way that you can all work together and strengthen that project is phenomenal, instead of everybody having one lens and looking through.
Right. Yeah. And that's some of the stuff that I do in my trainings, is how do we have effective team meetings? How do we innovate? How do we do all these things with the different personalities, and how and using these different personality types to be more successful?
Yeah. And so just a quick example is popping in my mind too, is parenting.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
I used it hugely as a parent.
Right? Like, you think that, I don't know, I always grew up thinking that whoever I married is going to parent the exact same way I do and have the same strategies and all of these things. And we go in and we don't, partly is based on the way that we were parented, and we either like or don't like, mimic, not mimic, but also our personality types, as you said as well, like how it's fight or flee. How do we handle in stress? How do we handle in all of these different situations? How do we handle in our way that we communicate? How do we handle in the way we're appreciated? Are so different that even the way we view our kids. So one kid may have a love language that one of us has, and we feel so appreciated by this child, and the other parent doesn't, because love language being experienced. So it's so fascinating how all of this relates to like careers, as you're doing, and personality with our kids.
Yes.
I find as well, like the love languages where I brought it in my practice is working with first responders and my husband. Like we were crazy. And when they come home, they are beyond exhausted, and these kids want their love tank filled. And so my husband used to kind of get frustrated because he would try to sit and play a game with them. My one son's all in it. He's sitting there, he's in it, he's engaged, he's right there because he's quality time.
Yeah.
My other son, though, fidgeting, he's all over him, he's climbing all over him.
Physical touch.
So my husband started to realize that if he came home and asked my one to play a game and the other one crawled all over him, and in between his turns, he would kind of like, give him hugs and, playing with him on the floor and doing all that stuff, or he comes in and he gives him a high five, or he makes sure that he hugs that child. The other one, he has to ask the child how his day is. And he starts realizing very, very quickly how to fill these two kids' buckets. And once these kids' buckets are done, they're off. They go. And then my husband has space to breathe and has this moment to be like, okay,
Yep. Yep.
but instead of him being frustrated and,
Mhm.
oh my God, like, why is this kid crawling all over me? I'm trying to do this with this one, and getting frustrated and making it this
Mhm.
moment actually stresses them out more. And then they're not getting their love buckets filled.
Yep.
And then they want more time with him, and he doesn't have any downtime.
Right.
So that's been huge in helping them as
Mhm.
well from that. I didn't actually know that they had the leadership one.
They
So that,
do. Yeah. And they even break the assessments down into a lot of different careers. And so they do have, I think they have just done one for I think they might have one for first responders. I'm not positive on that. I know they have for like military, teachers, ministry. They just
yeah,
released one for dentists.
read so I've done the adult one, the child one, and I've read the military one. And the military one, what I found the most effective actually was the adult one.
Mhm.
And but looking at it, because the child one, my brain just kept going, and it was almost it didn't engage me enough.
Mm.
But what I did was took the adult one and went, okay, how can I work this with the kids? How can I
Yep.
work this with kids now? And I've taken the adult one as well. I didn't know there's a leadership one. And with a lot of some of the first responders, as they're going into leadership, we've worked in that and figured out, okay, how can you do this with your crew? How can you find out what their love language is?
Yeah.
So really
Yeah.
curious to now read this
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. Appreciation at work. There's a website for that.
I'll check that out. I'll put that in the show notes for sure. All
Mhm.
right. This has been absolutely amazing. We do need to be mindful of everybody's time who's listening as well, but
Yes.
this is
Yes.
super helpful. So before we go, two things. One is links that people can find you, and we do have those in the show notes, so people can go into the show notes and find those. So first off, how can people find you?
I'm out in all those places. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I have a YouTube that I haven't done a lot with yet, but I'm working on getting a little bit more onto that. But all through Dandelion Leadership Coaching.
Dandelion Leadership Coaching. Okay,
Yes.
and it's down in the show notes, so just pop down there. It's there. Not sure if I have your YouTube, so please pass that on to me. If I
Okay.
do, I may have passed it on, but if
I
not,
don't know that I did because I have so little on there right now, but I have maybe 4 or 5.
well, we mentioned it there, so we've got to put it out there
Correct.
because who knows, this will be out there for a while.
Okay. All right.
Now, last thing before we go, one piece of advice for somebody that is in a toxic workplace.
I'd say, ask that question of where is the toxicity coming from? Is it coming from the leader? Is it coming from a coworker that just grates you wrong? Are you contributing to it somehow? And then once you kind of identify that, what can you do about it? Is there something that you can just stop engaging in some of the conversations? Some people can't talk about politics or certain things. And if you can just try to avoid those topics, maybe it'll kind of even some things out. But if it's a toxic boss, is there an avenue for you? Is there some place that, what is your company's policy? Can you go to a supervisor and talk to them about the issues? Can you go to someone else and just say, these are the issues that I'm seeing, what can we do about this? But if it's something where you're sick all the time, you're losing sleep, your quality of life is gone, you are fighting with the people at home all the time, it may be time to look at leaving. And in my book, I hope it's okay to plug this. There is a chapter on toxic workplaces and how to know when to leave, and a whole section on how to leave gracefully and how to do it if you're going to find a job first or if you're going to leave first. So there's a lot of good tips in there. Amazing.
Yeah. So definitely go and check out Guyla's website, get her book. Absolutely. There's going to be so much valuable information in there. I know I work with the deep burnout in people and help them get out of burnout. Having that avenue with leadership, if you are a leader, you can still benefit absolutely from all that Guyla is doing
Yeah.
And
even that book, even though some of it is really geared to helping people get a job and keep a job, the first section is on all these things we talked about with appreciation languages and personality type and strengths and getting to know ourselves better. And then there's sections on, how to do a better job at work and then how to leave gracefully and stuff. So there's a lot of personal help types of things in it too, even if you're not looking for a new job.
I can already think of a few people that I know are going to absolutely benefit from your book. So thank you so much for having us, for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Thanks for sharing all of your wisdom with us. This has been absolutely amazing. Anybody has any questions, go on to Guyla's link, reach out to her and ask her any questions that you do have.
Yeah. And if I might just add, you talked a lot on the personal side of things, and I was talking on the business side of things. And one thing I think is it's all interconnected. And, if things are bad at home, then you're going to take that to work and act out at work. And then if things are bad at work, you're going to take that home and act it out there. And so I'm looking, what I hope to do is self-awareness that helps people be more self-aware and how they can apply that in their personal lives and their work lives, so that when we have happier families, we have happier work lives, we have happier communities, and it's a whole cycle.
Absolutely. Yeah, it really is. That's what we do talk a lot in this entire podcast about how there's so many pieces of this puzzle, and it's not just one thing. So, and that's it. If you just leave that toxic workplace, but do not make the changes that we spoke of about never taking vacations, not taking care of yourself, only putting everything in that one bucket. I mean, these are just a few of the other pieces, but if you don't work on those other pieces, when you go, you're going to get back into burnout, toxic workplace or not, if you don't change some of the habits that also, because it's not just the toxic boss that has it is it's
our own behaviors as well. Yeah,
absolutely. All
right, that old saying, wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody for listening to the Burnout Expert Podcast. If you want, as we know, all of Guyla's information is down in the show notes. Mine is as well. If you want to go into my deep burnout work for everybody, into more information on this podcast, go to burnoutexpert.ca. If you want to go into my work with first responders, that's 911lifestyle.com. All of those links are below. You can email me, link is below. You can also book a call to chat with me if you'd like to work with me. All of that is down below. You can also get on my email list. So go and look into the show notes, grab those links, do your research, and reach out to either of us if you have any questions. We'll see you in the next episode.